Banks worldwide are partway through a long and difficult journey to modernise using technology. As we accelerate into the age of AI, banks are reimagining how they operate, using hybrid cloud and AI technologies to transform, reduce costs, and increase speed.
The IBM Institute of Business Value has published the findings of a new study that surveyed chief information officers to examine what can derail modernization and how these challenges can be addressed. And Shanker Ramamurthy, who's Global Managing Partner, Banking and Financial Markets at IBM Consulting, joins us now to discuss this in more detail. Now, Shanker, you have a global perspective on the state of digital transformation in banking. So what stage are most banks at on their modernization journeys today?
So the response comes in two components, one on the business side and one on the technology side that this particular study talks about. On the business side, the banking business model itself is fundamentally changing. If yesterday's banking model had 2/3 of people, process, technology, and investments focused on the middle and back office, supported by complex monolithic applications, with about 1/3 focused on customers and platforms, tomorrow's model is going to flip the pyramid on its head. With extreme digitization, reimagination of processes, leveraging hybrid cloud, AI, and generative AI, the middle and back office is going to get optimized and transformed materially and substantially. And more of the focus is going to be on the front office, platforms, and ecosystems. So that's the big shift that's happening from a business standpoint. From a technology standpoint, then the question is, how do I optimize my technology portfolio, particularly my core banking systems, which are overextended and monolithic and have been built over the last 50 years or so? This particular document that we produced, called the 94% Core Banking Problem, looked at what do technology officers, the CIOs, need to do, and what are the lessons learned as we go from yesterday to tomorrow.
Speaking about going forward in time or back in time, just last week, Shanker, IBM published findings of a global survey of Chief of Information Officers at banks titled The 94% Core Banking Problem, What Derails Modernization, and Actionable Insights from CIOs. What were the top challenges for bank CIOs that came out of that study?
So the study basically said that 94% of core banking projects around the world do not achieve the objectives they set out to achieve. It's not that they're failures, but the return does not achieve what they set out to achieve. Now, three things that leapt out in terms of the constraints. One is complexities abound. When you look at core banking modernization, complexities are often underestimated. Two, there are a bunch of constraints, whether it be technology-related or talent-related or interdependencies between the various applications that are often underestimated. And number three, the connection between business and technology in terms of unlocking business value, that is often more complex and underestimated and underappreciated as projects progress. Those were the three main things that leapt out.
And to follow up, what's actually causing those challenges? What's the root cause?
So there are three lessons learned. One is much of that modernization is about moving to a hybrid cloud compute model. It turns out that you got to be extremely intentional about that journey and know where the capabilities are going to be, which parts are going to be on the cloud, what's going to be in the existing IT estate, and that's got to be really thought through. The second one, the lesson learned, is this is not a one and done journey. You know, how do you eat the elephant? One bite at a time. How do you do this modernization? It's not one and done. It's an incremental journey. And you got to unlock economic value along the way. And it's really important to do that. And number three, AI and generative AI really helps with productivity. Leverage it.
Now, the study also touched on the ambitions of banks for deploying AI over the coming years. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, indeed. About 8% of the banks that we surveyed are adopting AI and generative AI on an enterprise-wide basis. About 80% of the financial institutions are doing pilots and proof of concepts. Now, as we look out the next 3 years, the study shows that over 92% of financial institutions are really going to be using AI and generative AI broadly, including agentic technology, which is quite nascent today. Only about 20% of the financial institutions are using agentic technology or multi-agentic technology today. That's going to change in the coming years. In the software development life cycle itself, generative AI is being used quite extensively, and we are getting something like 20% productivity when you apply generative AI across all aspects of the software development life cycle.
Now, Monday, you took part in a session with other experts looking at how to scale AI within the banking enterprise. What are the biggest challenges for banks right now in getting to the point where they can deploy AI at scale and get real return on investment?
So there's, again, two aspects to this. One is, because banks are heavily regulated, risk and compliance and governance on an enterprise-wide basis is a substantial issue in financial services. So ensuring repeatability, consistency, auditability, reliability, lack of hallucination, they're all big issues for banks to master, more so than almost any other industry. But once you get past that, banks are looking at revenue, cost, and risk as kind of the three main issues they're dealing with. And typically, unlike every other technology, when I look at generative AI, it's being adopted back to front as opposed to front to back. If you think about cloud and mobile, it was really applied front to back, meaning from the consumer back. With generative AI, initially it's being applied to make bank employees more productive. Whether it be in the IT function or whether it be in HR or procurement or finance and marketing and so on. So you try it out on your employees, learn, understand the risks and regulatory aspects. Then you apply it to agents of the bank that might touch the customer, be it people in the branches, be it private bankers and others, and then thoughtfully expose your clients to generative AI, recognizing when you expose clients to generative AI, you've got regulatory issues and risk issues that you've got to really have mastered. So back to front transformation as opposed to front to back transformation.
And are you actually seeing any banks around the world getting it right with AI and creating real value with it?
We've got a number of examples around the world.
Okay, share some.
So let me talk to you. I talked about revenue, cost, and risk. Let me go around the world. If I start from Japan, we've got banks in Japan who are using it for AML, anti-money laundering, and for counter fraud. If I move into Asia, TP Bank in Asia Pac is using this in their cards and their credit card business to drive improved cross-sell ratios and improved acceptance as they run campaigns. If I come into Europe, we've got banks like, say, NatWest in the UK. NatWest has rolled out a bot called Cora Plus that we work very closely with them on. 150% improvement in customer satisfaction. 94% of the digital banking transactions are being touched by Cora Plus. In fact, one of their executives was on IBM Think in London a few weeks ago saying, the best banks in the world will have the best bots. We could go into, Europe. There are banks like Credit Mutuel who've rolled this out across 20,000 plus of their people in their branches, across 5,000 branches, driving meaningful productivity. I could go into the Americas. Citibank is using this, for example, in their internal audit function for optimization. We've got other banks looking at 20,000 plus contracts, figuring out how do I get my lawyers to be more productive, driving over 20% productivity. Lots of examples around the world using IBM Consulting capability and, importantly, technologies like watsonx to achieve these competing objectives of revenue, cost, and risk, but always thoughtfully, always recognizing the risk and regulatory issues and the governance models that's got to be in place to ensure you achieve outcomes without compromising the things that really matter to banks and bankers and their customers.
Finally, Shanker, what should banking leaders be focusing on to accelerate the next stage of their digital transformation journeys?
So if I look at what's happening in the banking ecosystem, used to be that business strategy drove technology, but increasingly technology capability is starting to inform business strategy. The combination of hybrid cloud and AI and generative AI, these exponential technologies, plus quantum computing that's just over the horizon, are enabling banks to solve fundamentally new problems in fundamentally new ways. And so technology is informing business strategy. So given that world, a lot's going to change over the next 3 to 5 years. And the questions that I have for banks are, is your strategy ambitious enough for tomorrow's world? Are you executing fast enough? Because the horizon is approaching you very rapidly. Do you have the capability, the people, and the partnerships to succeed in the new world? And you got to think through that carefully, because tomorrow the banking business model is going to look radically different, and the winners are going to create a lot of economic value, and the ones who are slow are likely to be competed away. And what does it mean in banking to be competed away? Mergers and acquisitions. And we know around the world, banks are not achieving the cost of capital when you look at return on equity in the aggregate across the globe. And the ones that are not achieving their cost of capital, and they're not rethinking their strategy and execution and partnerships and ecosystems, are likely to be consolidated. So I can see that coming. Going to be lots of winners, and there are going to be some that are going to get competed away.
Well, Shanker, it's been great to have you here on Sibos TV for another really insightful conversation. Thank you so much for your time today in Frankfurt. That's Shanker Ramamurthy, Global Managing Partner, Banking and Financial Markets at IBM Consulting.